October 21st, 1899. Volume 2. Earthly goods must serve for the sanctification of man, not as his idols. The cause of chastisements. After going through most bitter days of privation, I was feeling tired and exhausted in my strengths, though I kept offering those very pains, saying, "Lord, you know how much being deprived of you costs me. But I resign myself to your most holy will, offering this most bitter pain as a means to prove my love and to placate you. These bothers, annoyances, wearinesses, coldnesses that I feel, I intend to send you as messengers of praises and of reparations for myself and for all creatures. This I have, and this I offer you. Surely you accept the sacrifice of the goodwill when one offers you what he can with no reserve. But come, for I can take no more." Oftentimes I had the temptation to conform to justice, thinking that I myself was the cause of his not coming. In fact, in these past days, Jesus had told me that if I did not conform, I would force him not to come, and not to tell me anything any more, so as not to grieve me. But I did not have the heart to do it, more so since not even obedience consented to it. While I was amid these bitternesses, first a light came, with a voice saying, "According to the measure in which man meddles in earthly things, so does he move away and lose esteem for eternal goods. I gave riches that they might use them for their sanctification, but they have used them to offend me, and to form an idol for their hearts. And I will destroy them, and their riches together with them." After this I saw my dearest Jesus, but so in suffering, offended and indignant with the people as to strike terror. Immediately I began to say to him, "Lord, I offer you your wounds, your blood, the most holy use of your senses which you made during the course of your mortal life, to repair for the offenses and for the bad use of the senses which creatures make." And Jesus, assuming a serious look, almost thundering, said, "Do you know how the senses of creatures have become? Like the screams of fierce animals, which drive men away with their roars, not allowing them to draw near. The rot and the multiplicity of sins is such that it spurts from their senses, which force me to flee. And Lord, how indignant I see you. If you want to continue sending chastisements, I want to come. Otherwise, I want to go out of this state. Why remain in it, since I can no longer offer myself as victim to spare the people?" And he, addressing me with seriousness, so much so that I felt terrified, told me, "You want to touch the two extremes. Either you want me to do nothing, or you want to come. Are you not content with the fact that people are spared in part? Do you think that Corrado is the best and the least in offending me? Is the fact that I spared it compared to other towns something trivial? So content yourself and calm yourself, and while I occupy myself with chastising the people, you accompany me with your sighs and with your sufferings, praying that the very chastisements may turn out for the conversion of the peoples." October 21st, 1901. Volume 4. The Upright Intention. Everything which is not done for God is dispersed like dust by a mighty wind. This morning, on coming, blessed Jesus seemed to be making a circle with his arms, almost to enclose me inside of it. And while clasping me, he told me, "My daughter, when the soul does everything for me, everything remains enclosed in this circle. Nothing goes out, be it even a sigh, a heartbeat, or just any movement. Everything enters into me, and in me everything is numbered. And I, as recompense, pour them back into the soul, but all doubled with grace, in such a way that, as the soul pours them once again into me, and I into her, she comes to acquire a surprising capital of grace. All this is my way of delighting, that is, to give to the creature what she has given me as if it were her own, always adding from my own. One who, with his ingratitude, prevents me from giving what I want, prevents my innocent delights. If then one does not operate for me, everything goes out of my circle, dispersed, like dust by a mighty wind. October 21st, 1921, Volume 13. Everything that Jesus did and suffered is in continuous act of giving itself to man. All the remedies needed for the whole humanity are in his life and passion. I was thinking about the passion of my sweet Jesus, and upon coming he told me, "My daughter, every time the soul thinks about my passion, remembers what I suffered, or compassionates me, she renews within herself the application of my pains. My blood rises to inundate her, and my wounds place themselves on the path to heal her if she is wounded, or to embellish her if she is healthy, as well as my merits to enrich her. The commerce she produces is amazing. It is as if she placed on a counter everything I did and suffered, earning twice as much. In fact, everything I did and suffered is in continuous act of giving itself to man, just as the sun is in continuous act of giving light and heat to the earth. My work is not subject to exhaustion. If the soul just wants it so, and as many times as she wants, she receives the fruit of my life. So if she remembers my passion 20, 100, 1,000 times, so many more times will she enjoy its effects. But how few are those who make a treasure of it! With all the good of my passion, one can see souls who are weak, blind, deaf, mute, crippled, living cadavers, such as to be disgusting. This because my passion is put into oblivion. My pains, my wounds, my blood are strength which removes weaknesses, light which gives sight to the blind, tongue which loosens the tongues and opens the hearing, way which straightens the crippled, life which raises the dead. All the remedies needed for the whole humanity are in my life and passion, but the creature despises the medicine and does not care about the remedies. And so one can see, in spite of all my redemption, the state of man perishing, as though affected by an incurable consumption. But that which saddens me the most is to see religious people who tire themselves out in order to acquire doctrines, speculations, stories. But about my passion, nothing. So many times my passion is banished from churches, from the mouth of priests. Therefore their speech is without light, and the peoples remain more starved than before. After this I found myself in front of a sun, and all of its rays poured upon me, penetrating inside. I felt invested in such a way as to feel I was prey to the sun. Its vibrating light prevented me from looking at it, and every time I looked, I felt a greater joy and happiness. Then my sweet Jesus came out from within that sun and told me, "Beloved daughter of my volition, my will inundates you like sun. You are nothing but the prey, the amusement, the contentment of my volition. And as you immerse yourself in it, my will pours upon you like solar rays the fragrances of my sanctity, of my power, wisdom, goodness, and so forth. And since my will is eternal, the more you try to be in it, making it more than your own life, the more you come to absorb within you my immutability and impassivity. Like a wheel, eternity spins around you, so that you may take part in everything, and nothing may escape you. And this so that my will may remain honored and fully glorified in you. I want the first daughter of my will to lack nothing, not one distinction that belongs to me, which may make her be distinguished before the whole of heaven as the first beginning of the sanctity of living in my will. Therefore be attentive, never go out of my will, that you may receive all the fragrances of my divinity, and so that, letting all that is yours come out, I may confirm all that is mine, and my will may remain in you as center of life." October 21st, 1925, Volume 18, Effects of One Act in the Divine Will. The sorrow of Jesus is suspended in the divine will, waiting for the sinner. This morning on coming, my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, I bring you the kiss of all heaven." And as he was saying this, he kissed me and added, "All of heaven is in my will, and because they are in this supreme volition, whatever I do, they feel the echo of my acts, and as though responding to my echo, they repeat what I do." Having said this, he disappeared. But after a few hours he came back, telling me, "My daughter, return to me the kiss I gave you, because all of heaven, my mamma, our celestial Father, and the Divine Spirit are awaiting the requital of your kiss, because since an act of theirs has come out in my will toward the creature who lives in the exile, they yearn for the requital of it to be returned to them in my same will." So, as he drew his mouth close to mine, almost trembling, I gave him my kiss, which produced a harmonious sound never before heard, which rose up high and diffused in everything and to every one. And Jesus, with unspeakable love, added, "How beautiful are the acts in my will! Ah, you do not know the power, the greatness, the marvel of one act in my will. This act moves everything, heaven and earth, as if they were one single act. And all creation, the angels, the saints, give and receive the return of that act. Therefore an act done in my will cannot be without return. Otherwise all would feel the sorrow of a divine act which has moved everyone putting of his own into it, and yet it is not requited. The operating of the soul in my will is like the silvery sound of a vibrant and shrill bell, which sounds so loudly as to call the attention of all, and it sounds and sounds again so sweetly that all recognize at that sound the operating of the soul in my will, all receiving the glory and the honor of a divine act." Having said this, he disappeared. Then I was continuing the fusing of myself in the divine will, feeling sorrow for each offense which has ever been given to my Jesus, from the first to the last man who will come upon earth. And while feeling sorrow, I asked for forgiveness. But while I was doing this, I said to myself, "My Jesus, my love, it is not enough for me to feel sorrow and to ask for forgiveness, but I would like to annihilate any sin, so that you may never, never again be offended." And Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, I had a special sorrow for each sin, and upon my sorrow hung the pardon for the sinner. Now this sorrow of mine is suspended in my will, waiting for the sinner when he offends me, so that as he feels sorrow for having offended me, my sorrow may descend to feel sorrow together with his, and immediately grant him forgiveness. But how many offend me and do not feel sorrow? So my sorrow and forgiveness are suspended in my will and as though isolated. Thank you, my daughter, for coming into my will to keep company with my sorrow and with my forgiveness. Please continue to go around in my will, and making my sorrow your own, cry out for each offense, sorrow, forgiveness, so that I may not be the only one who feels sorrow and impetrates forgiveness, but I may have the company of the little daughter of my will, who feels sorrow together with me. October 21st, 1929, Volume 27. Parallel between the coming of the Word upon earth and the divine will. I was feeling all concerned about the divine fiat. 1,000 thoughts crowded my mind with what my sweet Jesus had told me about it, especially on its reigning. And then I was saying to myself, "But does the divine will reign upon earth now? It is true that it is everywhere. There is not one point in which it does not exist. But does it hold its scepter, its absolute command in the midst of creatures?" But while my mind wandered amid many thoughts, my lovable Jesus, coming out from within me, told me, "My daughter, my divine will reigns. It can be paralleled to me, eternal Word, who, in descending from heaven, enclosed myself in the womb of my celestial mother. Who knew anything? No one, not even Saint Joseph, knew at the beginning of my conception that I was already in their midst. Only my inseparable mamma was aware of everything. So the great portent of my descent from heaven upon earth had occurred, and in reality. And while with my immensity I existed everywhere, heaven and earth were immersed in me, with my person I was enclosed in the maternal womb of the Immaculate Queen, no one knew me. I was ignored by all. And so, my daughter, here is the first step of the parallel between me, divine Word, when I descended from heaven, and my divine will that takes its first step to come to reign upon earth. Just as I directed my first steps toward the Virgin Mother, so did my will direct its first steps in you. And as it asked for your will, and you surrendered it, it immediately formed its first act of conception in your soul. And as it manifested its knowledges to you, giving you as though many divine sips, it formed its life and gave start to the formation of its kingdom. But for a long time, who knew anything? No one. Only you and I were aware of everything. And after some time, my representative, he who directed you, became aware of what was happening in you, symbol of my representative Saint Joseph, who was to appear as my father before creatures, and who, before I came out of the maternal womb, had the great honor and gift of knowing that I was already in their midst. After the first steps, I took the second. I went to Bethlehem to be born, and I was recognized and visited by the shepherds of that place. But they were not influential people. They kept for themselves the beautiful news that I had already come upon earth. Therefore they did not occupy themselves with making me known, with spreading me everywhere, and I continued to remain the Jesus hidden and unknown to all. But though unknown, I was already in their midst, symbol of my divine will. Very often other representatives of mine have come to you, from afar and from nearby, who have listened to the beautiful news of the kingdom of my divine will, the knowledges about it, and how it wants to be recognized. But some for lack of influence, some of will, they did not occupy themselves with spreading it, and it remained unknown and ignored, even though it already exists in their midst. But because it is not known, it does not reign. It reigns only in you, just as I was only with my celestial mamma and with my putative father, Saint Joseph. The third step of my coming upon earth is the exile, and I had this because the holy Magi came to visit me, who aroused some interest in searching for me. This search of me made Herod fearful, and instead of joining with them to come to visit me, he wanted to plot against my life in order to kill me, and by necessity I was forced to go into exile. Symbol of my divine will. Very often it seems that they arouse some interest, that they want to make it known by publishing it. But nothing. Some are taken by fear, some are afraid to compromise themselves, some do not feel like sacrificing themselves. Now with one pretext, now with another, everything ends up in words, and my divine will remains exiled from the midst of creatures. And just as I did not depart for heaven, but in the exile I remained in the midst of creatures, only with my divine mother and with Saint Joseph, who knew me very well, and I formed their paradise on earth, while for the others it was as if I did not exist. In the same way, having formed its life in you with all the cortege of its knowledges, if it does not receive the effects, the purpose for which it has made itself known, how can my fiat depart? In fact, when we decide to do a work, a good, no one can move us. Therefore, in spite of the exile and of its hiddenness, just as I did, doing my public life and making myself known after 30 years of hidden life, so will my divine volition not be able to remain always hidden, but will obtain its intent of making itself known in order to reign in the midst of creatures. Therefore, be attentive and know how to appreciate the great gift of my divine will in your soul. October 21st, 1932, Volume 31. The Creature, Heaven Studded with Stars. Creation is enclosed in the creature. How the practice of good forms the life of the good in the creature. Sign if Jesus resides in the soul. I am always prey of the divine fiat. It awaits me in all created things in order to double the love that it had in creating so many things for me. It seems that the divine volition yearns with love for its beloved creature, in order to be able to find the little support of love on which to lean its great love. So the heavens, the suns, the winds, are nothing other than insinuating and continuous calls in order to tell us, I have preceded you with my love, and you never leave me without yours. But while I felt that everything called me to love my Creator, my beloved Jesus, surprising me, told me, My daughter, as I created a heaven studded by stars that extends over your head, so I created a heaven inside of you. And this heaven is your soul that extends everywhere. From the top of the head even to the bottom of the feet, there is no part of you where this heaven does not extend. So you have a heaven on the outside and a heaven on the inside, even more beautiful. And everything that this heaven does by means of your nature, that is, if you think, speak, work, suffer, are nothing other than the most refulgent stars that go adorning this heaven of your soul. The sun that shines inside of her is my will. The sea that flows is my grace. The wind is my sublime truths that form the flowered meadows of the most beautiful virtues. Creation is completely enclosed in the creature. It was neither of our wisdom nor of our powerful love to create creation only outside of the creature, while of the inside, the vital and substantial part of her, to be without heaven, stars, and suns? No, no. When we do a work, we fill the inside and outside of our works, and with our own life, but so much that there would not be even a particle of her being that would not feel our life and the strength of our creative works. Therefore, we love the creature so much because of our work, and we leave our life in her in order to conserve what we have done. This is why when one does not feel in himself the life of my divine will, it means that he knows it theoretically, but not in practice. Because when one knows a good and practices it, it has the virtue of forming the substance of the life of the good that he knows. Otherwise he would remain without practice, like a painted picture, that having no life, does not have the virtue of forming its life in one who looks at it. My will is life. Our works are living works, not dead. And yet for one who does not know them, or does not seek to know them or put them in practice, they can be for him as works dead and without life. Therefore I await the creature to practice in order to realize, form, and grow the life of my volition, to make our works alive for her. After this I felt a fear, a doubt, if my sweet Jesus remained in my own soul, or he had withdrawn, leaving me alone and abandoned. Alas, what cruel thorn that stings and makes one feel the most pitiless death! But my always lovable Jesus, surprising me, told me, "My daughter, do not fear. In order to reassure you, I want to tell you the sign of when I reside and when I depart. So, if the soul submits to my will, loves it, and gives it the prime place, it is a sign that I reside there, because my presence has the virtue of keeping the human will submitted to mine. On the other hand, if she feels rebellious to my will, then it is a certain sign that I have withdrawn. Therefore, calm yourself and do not fear." October 21st, 1934, Volume 33. How the characteristic and property of the divine will is spontaneity. How everything beautiful, holy, great is in it. I am always on the way in the divine fiat. My little intelligence never stops. It runs. It always runs in order to be able to find me, for as much as it is possible for me, together on the course of the incessant acts that the divine will does for love of creatures. To think that it always loves me, it never ceases loving me, and I do not run in its love in order to love it, I cannot do it. I feel that I would do it a wrong. Rather, I feel myself in the labyrinth of its love, and without force, I love it, and I want to investigate its love in order to see how much more it loves me. Can I remain surprised in seeing its immense seas of love, and my love hardly a little drop, and what is more, drawn from its same sea? Therefore it is necessary for me to be in its same sea and to tell it, your love is mine, therefore we love each other with one single love. In this way I calmed down, and the divine volition was content. It was necessary to take of its, to be daring, otherwise I remain without anything to give, with a love so tiny that it dies on the lips. But while my mind blundered, my sweet Jesus, my dear life, making his brief little visit, because it seemed that he took enjoyment in listening to me, told me, my little daughter, the love, the acts, the spontaneous sacrifices without force that the creature makes me are so pleasing to me that, in order to enjoy them more, I enclose them in my heart. And so much is my contentment that I am always repeating, how beautiful they are, how sweet is her love. Ah, I find in them my divine way, my spontaneous sufferings, my love that always loves, without anyone forcing me or praying to me. You must know that one of the most beautiful characteristics, and as its legitimate property and virtue by nature that my divine will possesses, is spontaneity. Everything is spontaneous in it. If it loves, if it operates, if with one single act it gives life and conserves everything, no one forces it, nor does it make itself prayed to by anyone. Its motto is, I want and I do, because force says necessity, and we do not have need of anything nor of anyone. Force says lack of power, while we are powerful by nature, and everything depends on our power, and in one instant we can do everything, and in another instant, if we want, we can knock everything down. Force says lack of love, while such and so much is our love that it gives of the incredible. This is why we created everything without anyone praying to us or saying anything to us. And in the redemption itself, there was not one law over me. No one could obligate me to suffer so much, even to dying. But my law was love, and the operative virtue of my divine spontaneity, so much so that the sufferings first were formed in me. I gave them life, and then, investing creatures, they regave them to me. And I, with that spontaneous love with which I had given them life, received them in the same way. No one would have been able to touch me if I had not wanted it. In fact, everything beautiful, good, holy, great, is in operating with spontaneous ways, while one who operates and loves by force loses the most beautiful, and they can be called, and they are, works and love without life, and as a consequence subject to changing, while spontaneity produces firmness and good. Now, my daughter, the sign, if the soul lives in my divine will, is to love, to operate, and even to suffer spontaneously. Force does not exist. My will that has her with itself communicates its spontaneity to her in order to have her with itself in its love that runs, in its works that never cease. Otherwise it would be annoying to have her in its womb of light, without the characteristic of its spontaneous way. Rather, the creature is all eyes to look at my divine Fiat, because she does not want to remain behind, but she wants to run together, in order to love with its love, and in order to find herself in its works so as to exchange it, and to praise its power and creative magnificence. Therefore, run, always run, and let your soul, without force, plunge itself into my divine volition, in order to cross together its ways loving and full of stratagems for love of creatures. End of October 21st. Fiat.